I never thought I would live long enough to hear my own grandchildren repeat a sentence that felt like a slow brushstroke across my heart. It happened on a quiet afternoon when the sun was resting low, turning the living room golden. I had come over to drop off a basket of homemade bread and some toys I had saved for the kids. I was smiling when I knocked on the door, expecting little footsteps to run toward me like they always did. But instead, I heard a whisper from inside. A small voice. Curious, innocent. Daddy, is Grandma staying for dinner? There was a pause, a long one. Then my son's voice came through the door, calm, tired, almost rehearsed. No, Grandma doesn't matter anymore. Come on, move. My breath left me, not in a dramatic way, no shouting, no crying. Just a quiet sinking inside my chest, as though something gentle had been pushed out of place. I stood there holding the basket like a guest at the wrong house. The wind brushed my hair. I stared at the wood grain of the door, trying to understand the meaning behind his words. Did he really say that? Did he mean it? Or was it one of those sentences people say when they're stressed or frustrated? But the next moment answered me. The door opened only halfway. My son stood there, tall, exhausted, eyes somewhere behind me instead of on me. Mom, you should have called first, he said softly. I tried to smile. I thought I could just stop by. I brought bread, and some toys for the kids. He looked at the basket as though it were something heavy he didn't want to carry. The children peeked from behind him, their eyes uncertain. They used to run to me with open arms. Now they waited for permission. I bent down slightly and whispered, "Hi, sweetheart," to my youngest granddaughter. She looked up at her father. He shook his head. She stepped back. A small, invisible thread inside me loosened. He stepped outside, pulling the door almost shut behind him so the children couldn't hear. The golden light from their living room faded as the door narrowed. Mom, he said quietly, things are different now. We're busy. The kids have school. We can't have people dropping by all the time. People. Not you. Not Mom. Just people. I nodded, even though my hands trembled around the basket. I understand, I whispered. But did I? No. Not really. I looked at him carefully, searching for the boy I raised. The boy who used to sit on the kitchen counter while I baked. The boy who used to hug me spontaneously for no reason at all. The boy who once told his friends, "My mom is my hero." But all I saw was a grown man who had drifted far away, without telling me he was leaving. He took the basket. Thanks, he said. He didn't invite me in. I realized I wasn't supposed to ask. When the door closed, the sound was soft, but it echoed like a final line in a song. I stood on the porch for a moment, trying not to let the weight settle too deeply in my chest. The sky was turning orange, and somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. Everything felt normal, except me. Then, as I turned to walk toward my car, I heard their small voices again through the window. Daddy, why did Grandma come in? Because, he answered sharply, Grandma doesn't matter anymore. Now wash your hands. This time, the words didn't just brush my heart, they stayed. They pressed down. They settled where old wounds and memories live. But instead of crying, I whispered softly to myself, "Oh, my son, you don't know the truth. You don't know what I've held for you all these years." And that's when it occurred to me, quietly, slowly, almost like a forgotten memory unfolding. The document. The one tucked safely in my drawer. The one I had never shown him. The one he had no idea existed. I didn't plan to reveal it. Not then. Not ever. But life has a way of pushing you toward moments you didn't choose. So when my son told the kids, Grandma doesn't matter anymore, I finally realized something. Sometimes, a mother stays silent not because she has nothing to say, but because she is protecting a story that could change everything. And I knew. It was time to show him the document that would change the way he looked at me forever. I always thought my family was simple. Not perfect, not extraordinary, just a normal, loving home where people tried their best and sometimes stumbled. I wasn't a woman asking for much in life. Just a phone call every now and then, a warm hug from my son, and the joy of watching my grandchildren grow up. But life has a way of drifting, sometimes so quietly that you don't hear the distance until it echoes. My son, Daniel, was my only child. His father passed when Daniel was 12, and from that moment on, it felt like the world became much heavier for both of us. I remember waking up every morning and promising myself to stay strong, not because I felt strong, but because Daniel needed to believe I was. I worked 2 jobs, packed lunches, attended school plays, and cheered louder than anyone else at his baseball games. Back then, he used to look at me with a kind of admiration that made every sacrifice worth it. When he grew older, things felt even closer between us. He was the kind of teenage boy who didn't slam doors or yell. Instead, he talked to me, sometimes late at night, sometimes while washing the dishes. He would say things like, "Mom, I'll take care of you one day," and I would smile because it felt like the world had finally given me something kind. After high school, he started working early, trying to help with the bills without me asking. He saved up for his own car, and when he brought it home for the first time, he hugged me in the driveway. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. That boy, the one who hugged me, felt like sunshine. Then he met Emma. I still remember the day he introduced her. She walked into my home like a soft breeze, polite and gentle. She brought a small box of cookies and insisted on helping with the dishes. I thought she was wonderful. In the early months of their relationship, everything felt easy. She asked about my recipes. She laughed at my old stories. She hugged me when she left. I used to tell my friends, "I'm so lucky. My daughter-in-law is a blessing." When they married, I cried in the front row, tears of happiness. Daniel looked handsome, and Emma looked radiant, but what made my heart full was the way they looked at each other, like 2 people who had found exactly what they needed. For years after, everything moved naturally. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday dinners. I became the grandmother who bought too many toys and baked too many pies. The children adored me. They would run around my house, leaving fingerprints on every window, and I loved every one of them. But somewhere along the way, small things began to shift. It started gently, like a chair moved an inch each day until you suddenly notice it's no longer where it used to be. Emma became quieter around me, not unkind, just distant. Daniel started canceling visits more often. "Mom, we're busy." "Mom, the kids have school." "Mom, we'll come next week." But next week didn't come. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I visited too often. Maybe I offered too much advice and didn't notice. I replayed conversations in my head at night, searching for reasons like a woman searching for lost keys she's not even sure she misplaced. Then came the holidays. They stopped spending Thanksgiving with me. Then Christmas became rushed, a quick drop-off of gifts, a short visit, an excuse about other plans. Birthdays became quieter. One time a neighbor asked, "Don't your grandchildren visit you anymore?" I smiled and said, "They're growing up, life gets busy." But my heart knew that wasn't the full truth. Still, I held on to hope. Mothers do that. No matter how quiet the distance grows, we keep believing something will bring them back. But along with the growing distance, there were other small details, moments so subtle they seemed harmless at first, but heavy in hindsight. Like when Emma started answering Daniel's phone for him, or when I called and heard him whisper in the background, "Tell her I'll call later," and later never came. Or when I brought over soup one evening because Daniel had the flu, and Emma met me at the door with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, saying, "We've got it handled, but thank you." I drove home that night with the soup still warm beside me, wondering when kindness had turned into intrusion. But the biggest shift came the day they asked me, gently, politely, to give them space. Space. That was the word they used. Space, the polite term for less of you. I agreed. Of course I did. Mothers agree even when it hurts, because we'd rather bleed quietly than make our children uncomfortable. But what they didn't know, what they never even thought to ask, was that I was carrying something. Something old. Something important. Something I kept hidden because I didn't want it to change our relationship. A document. A truth. A piece of our past that they never asked about. A piece of paper that held something bigger than money, bigger than inheritance. It held sacrifice, protection, and choices that shaped our entire lives. I had tucked it away decades ago, never expecting it would matter again. Never expecting I'd have to reveal it. I told myself the past was buried, and I told myself that secrets are sometimes acts of love. But secrets are tricky things. They wait. They breathe quietly in drawers and memory boxes. They wait for the right moment or the wrong one to rise. And eventually, life brought us to the moment where that truth mattered far more than I ever imagined. Because while I stayed quiet, trying not to disturb the shaky balance of our family, they were slowly rewriting their own version of me. A version where I was unnecessary. A version where I didn't matter. A version where I could be pushed aside without guilt. And then came the day I stood on their porch, holding a basket I had made with my own hands, only to hear the words echo through the door. Grandma doesn't matter anymore. Those words didn't just sting because of their cruelty. They stung because they were built on a foundation of forgetting who I was, what I had done, what I had given up. Forgetting the years I carried Daniel through storms he didn't even remember. Forgetting the nights I stayed awake sewing patches on his clothes. Forgetting the bills I paid with money meant for myself. Forgetting the one moment, the one document that could change his entire understanding of who he was, where he came from, and how much I had fought for him. He didn't know any of it. Emma didn't know any of it. The children certainly didn't know. But life has a strange way of circling back to the truths we hide. And that document, fragile, yellowing, folded in thirds, had been waiting all along. And now, as the distance between us stretched like a road with no return, the story moved toward the storm we never saw coming. A storm stirred not by anger, but by truths long silenced and love long taken for granted. Distance didn't arrive suddenly. It wasn't a storm that crashed through our lives and left debris scattered across our hearts. It was more like a steady drizzle, quiet and almost invisible, a soft mist that settled over everything until one day I woke up and realized I couldn't remember the last time I had felt the warmth of my son's closeness. It happened so slowly that I kept telling myself it wasn't real, even as I felt my clothes becoming soaked with the cold of being left behind. One small moment at a time, the closeness I once shared with my son began to slip through my fingers like sand I was trying desperately to hold on to. I remember a day when I baked an apple pie, his favorite. I wrapped it carefully, tied a little ribbon around the box, and drove to their house with excitement bubbling inside me. Baking for Daniel had always been a quiet language between us, something we both understood without saying a word. When I got there, Emma opened the door only a few inches. Her smile was polite but thin, like she was pulling it over her face instead of letting it appear naturally. "Oh, hi," she said, her voice soft but distant. Her eyes flicked behind her, as if she was checking whether I was blocking the hallway or disturbing something. "Daniel didn't tell me you were coming." I held out the pie. "I wanted to surprise you all, it's still warm." She hesitated before taking it, as if accepting it meant accepting me. "Thank you, but the kids are occupied right now. Maybe another day." Another day. Those two words became familiar, an echo that followed me wherever I went. They showed up often, like a bookmark placed in the same chapter every time because no one wanted to keep reading. Another day for a visit. Another day for dinner. Another day for me. I drove home that evening with empty hands and a heavy heart. When I placed my car keys on the counter, the clink sounded too loud, like it was breaking the stillness in my house, a stillness that felt sharper each time I walked into it. I tried to make tea, but the boiling water sounded almost harsh, like it was interrupting something. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the steam rising from the cup, and felt an ache I didn't want to name. Another day never came. Weeks passed, then months. And even though I called, even though I tried, something had undeniably shifted. The warmth between us had turned into cold politeness, the kind you give strangers you don't want to upset. I told myself it was life. People get busy, families grow, children demand attention. But deep down, my heart kept whispering something is wrong. One afternoon, I ran into their neighbor at the grocery store. She recognized me right away, her eyes lighting up. "Oh, you're Daniel's mother," she said. I smiled, gently and politely. "Yes, I am." She adjusted her hands on her cart and tilted her head with a kind of casual curiosity. "I never see you with them anymore. Everything okay?" I paused, feeling something in my throat tighten. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to sound confident. But instead, the truth struggled up my chest and came out in a whisper. We're all just busy. It was the truth wrapped in a soft lie, a lie meant to protect someone who wasn't even there to hear it. She nodded politely, but her eyes softened in that way people's eyes soften when they see a crack in your smile. I thanked her quickly and walked away, pretending I had forgotten something in another aisle. Later that night, I sat on my couch with the lights off. Darkness can be a cruel friend because it gives old thoughts the space to grow louder. I wondered when I stopped being part of their world. Was it a single moment? Or was it a collection of missed calls, canceled plans, unspoken feelings, and silent misunderstandings? I didn't know. What I did know was this. Even though I had been quietly pushed away, even though I was fatting from their daily lives, I still loved them all, every one of them. Even Emma, though her distance felt sharper every day. There was one moment that stayed with me longer than the rest. It happened during a family gathering, the last one before everything truly fell apart. It was the children's birthday party. I had bought them gifts, nothing extravagant, just thoughtful things I knew they would love. I had also baked cupcakes, staying up until midnight to decorate each one. I wanted the day to feel special. When I arrived, the house was full of noise. Children ran around laughing, parents chatted in small groups, and music floated through the rooms like gentle background air. But when I walked in, Emma barely looked at me. "You can put your cupcakes there," she said, pointing toward a small folding table in the corner. Her tone wasn't sharp, just distant, dismissive, the way you might speak to someone helping at a school event. Not a grandmother, not family. The kids saw me, and for a moment everything felt right. They hugged me tightly, showed me new toys, pulled me from room to room with excitement. For a few minutes I felt alive again, seen, appreciated, loved. But then Daniel called them back. "Come here, don't drag Grandma around." He said it too sharply, too quickly, as if he wanted to control the moment before it grew. The children froze mid-step. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I backed away slowly and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart, it's okay." But it wasn't okay. Not for them, not for Daniel, not for me. Something invisible but important had shifted. Throughout the party, I noticed Daniel and Emma whispering in the kitchen. Their eyes moved toward me and then quickly away, as though my presence was an annoyance they were trying to hide. When I left, I carried my empty cupcake tray out to the car. The air outside was cool, calm, gentle, nothing like the heaviness I felt inside. I sat behind the wheel for a moment and breathed slowly, as though breathing would steady something inside me. But it didn't. Something had changed. I didn't know what. I didn't know why. But I knew the distance wasn't an accident. It wasn't life or busyness. It was something deeper, something unspoken, something that lived in the spaces between their sentences and their glances. And then one night, I got a call from Emma. Her voice was tense, not unkind, but strained the way a rope sounds when it's pulled too tight. "Can we talk?" she asked. I sat down slowly, bracing myself. "Of course." She sighed, long and heavy. "Things are complicated right now. We need some space. The kids need stability. Daniel is stressed. We just need to simplify things." Simplify, another new word. Another gentle curtain over a painful truth. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "I think it's best if you don't come by unannounced. And maybe calls could be less frequent." Less frequent, less of me. I swallowed hard and nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "I understand." But I didn't. Not then. Not until later, when the truth revealed itself in ways I never expected. After that conversation, I stepped back. I didn't visit for weeks. I didn't want to burden them. I didn't want to be the cause of tension in their home. I told myself I was doing it for them, for the children, for the family I still loved deeply. And while I stayed quiet, the document stayed in my drawer just as quietly, untouched, unspoken, holding the truth I had carried for decades. But life has a way of bringing hidden things to the surface. It has a way of revealing buried truths exactly when you least expect them. And soon, the quiet tension would unravel. Soon, the storm would break open. Soon, the distance would reveal itself not through shouting or anger, but through 6 small words spoken behind a half-closed door. "Grandma doesn't matter anymore." Those words would pull everything to the surface. The past, the secrets, the sacrifices, and the document I had kept hidden. The truth that waited patiently was coming. The day everything shattered didn't look like a day destined for heartbreak. It wasn't stormy. It wasn't chaotic. There were no warning signs embroidered into the morning light. It was one of those soft, ordinary days that feel almost fragile in their calmness. The kind of day where you wake up believing the world is gentle, believing that nothing bad could possibly rise out of air so still. I remember waking up to the faint sound of birds outside my window. The breeze drifting through the curtains was cool enough that it made me pull my shawl a little tighter around my shoulders. I brewed my morning coffee, letting the warm aroma drift through the kitchen. I stood by the window, wrapping both hands around the mug as I watched a few golden leaves pirouette down from the tall tree near the porch. It all felt peaceful, familiar, safe. I didn't know that heartbreak was waiting for me, hidden just a few hours ahead. Around midday, with the quiet house echoing around me, I decided to bake bread. Not because anyone asked for it, not because there was a reason, just because baking had always been a language of love in our family. My mother had taught me the recipe when I was young, guiding my small hands with her warm, flour-dusted fingers. And Daniel, even as a little boy, always loved that bread more than anything else I baked. On hard days, on joyful days, on ordinary afternoons, nothing made him smile like that warm, crusty loaf. So I pulled out the mixing bowl and began. I measured, kneaded, folded, and shaped the dough with the same quiet tenderness I had once used to straighten Daniel's collar before school or brush the hair from his forehead when he was sick. As I worked, memories rose like the yeast inside the dough, soft, expanding, impossible to contain. His little footsteps, his laughter, his birthdays, his teenage sulks, his shy smiles, our late-night conversations when he was older. By the time the bread finished baking, the entire house smelled of warmth, real warmth, the kind that feels like home. I placed the loaf carefully into a small basket, added a jar of homemade jam, and tucked 2 small gifts into the corner. A tiny wooden train painted in bright colors for my grandson, and a crocheted dress I made for my granddaughter's favorite doll. I didn't call ahead. Maybe I should have. Maybe I was ignoring the warning signs Emma had been giving me for months. Maybe I was holding on to the hope that love, real love, doesn't need appointments or reservations or written invitations. I simply wanted to show up with something warm, something soft, something from my heart. So I tied my scarf, grabbed the basket, and drove. With every mile, my excitement tangled with worry. Part of me tried to ignore the uneasiness blooming in my chest, whispering that this might not go the way I hoped. But I pressed my foot on the gas anyway, telling myself that love was reason enough. When I finally reached their house, my hands trembled just slightly as I climbed the porch steps. I breathed in slowly, straightened my shoulders, and knocked gently. I waited. Silence. I knocked again. And then, from behind the door, from a child's small, innocent voice, came the question that pierced straight through me. "Daddy, is Grandma staying for dinner?" A pause. A long one. And then my son's voice, flat, dismissive, cutting in a way that felt like it came from someone I didn't know. "No, Grandma doesn't matter anymore. Come on." The world shifted. Everything inside me seemed to stop, like someone had suddenly turned the universe's volume all the way down. My breath caught painfully in my chest. My fingers tightened around the basket, and for a moment, I felt my knees weaken. I have lived through pain in my life, the kind that comes without permission, but nothing prepared me for hearing my own child say I didn't matter. When the door opened, Daniel stepped outside just enough to block the entrance, just enough to make it clear I wasn't being invited in. He didn't hug me, he didn't smile, and he couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, you should have called," he said, like my presence on his porch was an inconvenience. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. "I didn't want to bother you," I whispered, even though everything inside me felt bruised. He nodded stiffly. "We're trying to keep the kids on a routine. Things are complicated." Complicated. The word that had become a barrier between us, an explanation that explained nothing. I handed him the basket, because I didn't know what else to do. He took it with a politeness so cold it felt like a wall. The children peeked out behind him, eyes sparkling with curiosity, little faces I loved more than my own breath. But Daniel gently motioned them back inside, and the disappointment in their small expressions felt like another wound on top of the first. When the door closed between us, I felt something inside me quietly break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft, painful tearing, like a seam splitting in an old, beloved fabric. I walked back to my car slowly, each step heavier than the last. The sky felt darker, the air colder. When I sat behind the wheel, I rested my forehead against my hands and let the silence press its weight against my ribs. That night, the house felt emptier than it ever had. I sat alone in the living room, the lights dimmed, replaying those words over and over in my mind. Grandma doesn't matter anymore. It echoed, not just in my ears, but in my bones. After a long time sitting there, I got up, walked into my bedroom, opened the drawer, and took out the document I had kept hidden for decades. The document that held the truth about everything. I laid it on the kitchen table, staring at it through a blur of tears. All the sacrifices I had made, all the battles I had fought alone, all the love I had given without asking for anything in return. I never wanted Daniel to know. I wanted his childhood to be light, to be free, to be protected from the storms I endured to keep him safe. But now the truth was the only thing I had left. Not to hurt him, not to shame him, but because when someone tells you that you don't matter, sometimes the only way to save love is to reveal what love really cost. The next morning, I woke with a strange steadiness in my chest, a calm that felt more like purpose than peace. I dressed carefully, placed the document into an envelope, and drove back to their house. This time, I wasn't carrying bread or jam or toys. I was carrying the truth. Daniel opened the door immediately, surprised, guarded, unsure. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said softly. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him just like before, but the air between us felt charged, heavier. I handed him the envelope. "Before you decide," I whispered, my voice steady, "before you choose to close the door on me again, you need to know what you were protected from. You need to know what I carried alone so you wouldn't have to." He frowned, confused, and opened it. I watched his eyes move across the pages. Custody papers, financial records, letters from his father's family, legal notes, decisions I made, money I never received, battles I shielded him from. And finally, the last page, the one that spelled out the truth he had never known. That I gave up every penny of support I was owed. That I raised him alone, without asking for help. That I chose peace for him over justice for myself. That every sacrifice was made quietly, lovingly, without expectation. His hands trembled. His breath quickened. His eyes filled with a stunned, painful realization. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "I never knew." "No," I said gently, "you didn't, because I never wanted you to carry that burden." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And in that moment, just one fragile, trembling heartbeat, everything began to change. Daniel didn't just sit down. He collapsed onto the porch step as though the years he had forgotten, the years I had carried, had suddenly landed on his shoulders all at once. The papers trembled in his hands, rustling softly in the breeze. I watched him trace the faded edges, page by page, as if the truth wasn't just something he was reading, but something he was feeling for the very first time in his life. And I stood there, frozen, not because I wanted to appear strong, but because I genuinely didn't trust my legs to bend without crumbling beneath me. For so long, I had carried that truth alone, through nights that felt endless, through moments of fear and exhaustion, through decisions that broke me quietly but protected him loudly. Seeing that truth finally in his hands felt like watching a dam crack open after decades of pressure. Daniel slowly lifted his head, and the look in his eyes was something I hadn't seen in years. Not anger, not distance, not irritation. It was heartbreak and guilt, and love tangled together in a way that softened his entire face. "Mom," he whispered, voice tight, "you raised me alone, you carried everything, you never told me." I nodded gently, my throat tight but my voice steady. "You needed a childhood, Daniel, not a courtroom, not chaos, not the weight of choices you didn't ask for." His eyes dropped again, and he swiped at a tear with the back of his hand like a boy, trying not to cry in front of his mother. I thought you didn't want help," Emma said. He stopped mid-sentence, swallowing the rest, but I already knew. I had known for a long time. I lowered myself onto the step beside him, feeling the rough wood beneath my hands. "Daniel," I whispered softly, "I'm not angry with you. Truly, I'm not. I just needed you to know that I matter. Not because of what I did, not because of the sacrifices, but because I'm still your mother, and even mothers need to matter." His shoulders shook as he covered his face, his loss for words louder than any apology he could have spoken. Then the door creaked open, just an inch, and Emma stepped outside. Her eyes flickered between Daniel's grief and the envelope in his lap, and her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice softer than I was used to hearing from her. Daniel rose slowly, pushing the papers into her hands. She looked at him, confused, before lowering her eyes to the first page. And then she read every line, every date, every sacrifice, every decision I had once made quietly, believing that no one else ever needed to know. With each page, her posture changed. The tension in her neck loosened. Her stern expression melted into something almost childlike, unsure, vulnerable, humbled. When she reached the final page, she pressed the stack against her chest, holding it there for a long moment before lifting her gaze to me. "I never knew," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought you were imposing, interfering. I thought you wanted control. I thought you were making things harder. I didn't know what you gave up. I didn't know what you protected him from. I didn't know how much you carried for him." I offered her a small, tired smile, the kind of smile that grows from years of quiet understanding. "You weren't supposed to know. Love doesn't always ask to be seen. Sometimes it just gives." And something happened then, something unexpected, something gentle. For the first time in years, Emma stepped closer. Her eyes glistened, her chest rose and fell unevenly, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked like glass. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. We pushed you away. We judged without knowing anything. We saw your presence as a burden instead of a blessing." A single tear slid down her cheek, a tear not just of regret, but of realization. Daniel reached for my hands then, gripping them tightly, the same way he did when he was a scared little boy clutching me in the dark after a nightmare. His hands were bigger now, stronger, older, but the feeling was the same. "Mom," he murmured, choke-voiced, "you matter, you have always mattered. I don't know when I stopped seeing that. I don't know why I let things get this far." I squeezed his hands gently, the way only a mother can, reassuring, forgiving, unconditionally warm. "Because life gets loud," I said softly. "And sometimes the people who love the quietest get drowned out, but love never stops, it just waits." The door opened wider behind us, and two small faces peeked out. The children, wide-eyed and uncertain, sensing something big had happened but not knowing what. I smiled at them gently, opening my arms just a little. They didn't hesitate. They ran to me. Their small arms wrapped around my neck and waist, their warm little bodies pressing into mine as if they were reclaiming something precious they didn't even realize they had lost. I held them tightly, not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of pure, overwhelming relief. Nothing had magically healed. Nothing had erased the months of distance. But something important shifted that day, something delicate, something hopeful. Daniel led me inside. Emma made tea. The children climbed onto my lap, one on each knee, their heads resting on my shoulders as if they had never forgotten the comfort of it. I read them a story, my voice steady, my heart full, while Daniel and Emma watched from across the room, their eyes softer than I had seen in years. As the evening sun settled into warm gold across the living room walls, Daniel sat beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, can we start over?" I turned to him, my eyes warm with everything I had held inside for so long. "We never stopped," I said softly. "We just forgot where we left off." And in that moment, something inside all of us began to heal. The weeks that followed were slow but steady. Small gestures replaced big misunderstandings. Real conversations replaced assumptions. Apologies replaced silence. Healing replaced distance. The document, the truth that broke everything open, was quietly tucked away in a drawer. It didn't need to be spoken of again. Its purpose had been fulfilled. It had restored something fragile. Not the past, not perfectly, but the heart of the family. One evening, when I was babysitting the children, I tucked my grandson under his blanket. The room was dim and peaceful, the way bedrooms feel when the world finally softens for the night. He reached out and touched my hand lightly. "Grandma," he whispered, "Daddy says you're important. He says we forgot for a little while, but we remember now." I kissed his forehead, my heart swelling, aching, healing all at once. "That's all that matters," I whispered. And it truly was. Because love, real love, doesn't disappear when forgotten. It waits. Patiently. Quietly. Unshaken. For the moment, someone finally remembers its truth.